heard about. You just asked me how Google works, which is funny. Is that how Google works? You've seen the Chat GPT.
I've heard about it. Yeah, I heard. Yeah, a little bit, just because it's been in the news, and I looked it up and realized I needed to read more to be able to understand what it actually is. But
it's my understanding that Chat GPT is going to come for all of our businesses.
Yeah.
How do you expect it to disrupt leather tanning?
I was just thinking, from a purely selfish standpoint, I wish it had been around when I was in high school, so I didn't have to write any essays.
Yeah. Correct.
Or I guess college for that matter. But I wonder if, I don't know, I wonder how many identical essays are going to be turned in across the country when AI starts writing everything for everybody.
Too lazy to load it up, but I'd be curious to see how it answers some of these leather questions that we're going to talk about.
I wonder.
All right,
so not a lot of background to pull from.
Right. Well, maybe they'll just scrape our podcast here and get some good information, Nick. Let's start the show, right?
Let's do it. I'm still getting my voice back from having a little cold.
Yeah?
So I sound a little...
Is that what it's like when you have kids that go to school and just get sick all the time? Yeah.
I'm usually pretty good, but
yeah,
sometimes you can get blasted.
Sometimes you get blasted, everybody. You heard it from Nick himself. Welcome to Full Grain Podcast, everybody. I'm Phil Callis here with Nick Horween. Today we're doing a Q&A. People have sent us questions through different mediums. A lot of it on our email. If you want to email us a question, it's fullgrainpodcast@gmail.com. I've also been doing some live streams on the Ashland Leather YouTube channel to collect some additional questions. So there are some questions from the YouTube chat as well. I do a live stream every morning this recently, Nick, which is it's extra. But I honestly just love talking about leather. I'm such a nerd. All right, Nick, let's go. Let's just hit it hot and heavy here.
Let's do it.
Like that cold hit you. How resistant to scratches is shell Cordovan versus Dublin? How do you repair scratches? And this one is from GH on YouTube.
Well, why don't you take this one? I mean, because you are working with the stuff. I mean,
I'll take it.
I can chime in, but I think you.
Yeah, just like correct me when I give this false information so that ChatGPT can get some good, good.
Can build a correct
or
maybe we should fill it full of false information.
Well, Cordovan and Dublin are tanned using the same tree barks, and that's sort of the extent of the similarities, as far as I can tell. They're both the veg tan because of those tree barks, and then Dublin has a hard wax that's finished onto the surface, where the Cordovan doesn't really have any sort of finish layer up on top. They both will scratch, in my experience. However, the good news for these two particular leathers is they both tend to become more filled in. Those scratches tend to become more filled in just from wearing the stuff. So, but they're for different reasons. So the Cordovan, I tried to describe this on a live stream the other day. It's kind of tricky to wrap my brain around and then convey the information. But the Cordovan, that shell membrane, is not as thin as normal grain leather. Therefore, you can sort of gouge into it a slight bit and still have some substance of that shell that you're able to smooth everything out back to. So the scratches on the Cordovan tend to be filled in easily that way. And you can sort of increase the level of fill by adding like a neutral polish. Like I know you use the Venetian shoe cream. I use the Saphir Cordovan cream. Any neutral polish with some wax in it will fill in those scratches in the same way that when you wax your car, you're filling in the scratches on the car. The Dublin, the scratches that you tend to see can be filled in because you're just scratching that surface wax layer, and then just with a little bit of heat, I've actually done it with a hairdryer before, you can just heat the wax and the scratch kind of goes away. You can also just burnish it a little bit, apply a little bit of friction, and melt the wax back into place. So that's actually answers to both questions. How did I do there, Nick?
Yeah, good.
It's like I think leather quiz with Nick Horween.
I think that in terms of which is more resistant to scratches, the shell Cordovan is more abrasion resistant than the Dublin. So it'll be more resistant, I guess, just overall. And the Dublin, yeah, it's a softer, like the grain layer and that wax layer is just a softer, less compacted surface. But I think the Dublin is actually a little easier to repair or at least maybe not easier, but faster, because you can just rub that wax back into place depending on the nature of the scratch.
Just rub one out.
Yeah. Where the shell might take a little bit, since it is dense and it can be like it wants to, it's the density makes it like want to hang on to that impression a little bit more. Sometimes it can take a little bit more coercion to get it out of there with the back of a spoon or brushing or something like that.
Next question. What is Cypress leather? And is it a color or a procedure? And this is from Matt on YouTube. The reason I put this second, because very selfishly, we just released some products at Ashland in the Cypress leather, and I love it. And people are going crazy for the royal blue right now.
Nice.
It's just a really great color. But can you describe what the Cypress leather is?
Yeah, so going back to the Dublin thing, it draws from the Dublin sort of look aesthetic. And then the idea was it's not a veg, it's a chrome leather. So it's more robust just in terms of strength and all the things we talk about with chrome tan leather. And then also a little bit more forgiving in terms of cutting in the break, just because of the base tannage. So it's effectively like a waxed Latigo. Yeah. With a different wax blend than normal, but that's a chrome base tannage with a really heavy vegetable retannage. So, and then aniline finish and then waxed on top. So it's kind of just like Dublin, except for the base tannage is not veg, it's chrome.
I think the result that I've seen too is there's something about the Cypress that I've noticed is a little bit more dense, and I'm unsure why, but I'm imagining it's because of that chrome tannage, and then the veg retannage is sort of giving you like a little bit more fill, as opposed to the Dublin, which doesn't have any of the chrome for the base tannage. But it's like the big observation for me is how resilient it is. I took mine on my most recent vacation and threw it in the backpack that you gave me alongside keys. And I wanted to see what it would do. It scratched it up, but then I wore it in my pocket and the scratches went away. And it's flatter than Dublin. It's less pillowy in terms of like I said, the density. It just feels very substantial. So it's got but it also has a body to it. It will move. It's flexible. It's really nice. You have the shoes in it. And I believe somebody later has a question here too about another shoemaker using the Cypress for footwear. But what's your experience with the Cypress on your, I believe they're Vibergs?
Yeah. No, it's really nice. It's good. It's a firm, like a denser, firmer leather. So the break-in is a little bit longer. I think I'm still breaking those in, but it's very resilient. It's tough. I mean, all the details you're noticing, I think, are correct. And I think that mostly draws from the different retainage, but also the drying. Since it's a chrome, we can dry it with heat, so we can paste it against glass, so you get a flatter grain and less stretch overall, because we can't dry Dublin that way because it won't tolerate the heat the same way that Latigo base will.
And for me, I don't know how much credit I want to take. I'm going to try to take it all. For Dan and I have been making wallets out of the Dublin leather and loved it. The color is great. The feel is great. The look is great. The wax, that sort of impervious finish, is incredible for a small leather good. But we wanted something with less stretch, which is how I believe Dan actually said, well, why don't we try to combine the Dublin and the Latigo together? So I'm digging it, man. I think, and it's selfishly for you, like thinking if I was a tanner, it's a great product to make because the yields are better. So I don't know, like I want to linger on this question a slight bit more, but I actually am not necessarily seeing a reason to choose Dublin over the Cypress at the moment. But can you imagine a scenario where you would choose a Dublin over this new Cypress?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you mean for wallets or just in general?
Anything. I mean, yeah, any application.
I mean, there are some applications, footwear and otherwise, that a little bit of stretch is nice. I think that the Dublin Essex family will still age a little bit more quickly. You'll get a deeper patina to it. And then on the sort of in the natural realm, people think of like a natural veg tan color, will be better on the Dublin or Essex than it would be on the Latigo, because we've got that pale blue base. So we can do a natural kind of color, but
It never gets that nice veg shade.
it can have like a little bit of a green cast to it sometimes. So we can't go too light in terms of that color. But so I still think they're different enough. They're different enough. And then one's with chrome and one's without chrome. So that's a big distinction for a lot of people. But yeah, I mean, I think that you could make the same exact product out of both of those leathers and like 99% of the time be happy with either. It would just be a little bit different.
I think I see what you're saying about the patina in terms of color.
It'll be slower. It'll still happen. It'll just I think it'll take a little longer.
The blue here is not darkening fast, like you just said, but the luster is actually better, I see, on the Cypress. And it must be because it's such a dense, more compact product. Okay. Yeah. All right. I'm going to move on to another question here. This is something that actually stumped me. Usually I don't get stumped in like live chats. This is one that got me. Is there a leather that you don't like? And maybe even more narrowly focused on like a leather that you make that you don't like? Or is that too rude of a question?
Can I say vegan leather?
You can say whatever is that leather?
No.
Okay.
Is there leather? Yeah, there are plenty of leathers that I don't like that we have made or make. It's not.
Give me your hate list.
Man. We've done some stuff. It's just like some brush off leathers.
Oh, you didn't like that?
And some leather that you're like intentionally screw up while you're buffing it to give it like this torn, two-tone. I think it was called Tempest.
Yeah, I'm going to give that a thumbs down.
It was like, and we did it in like pastels, and it was just, it was like a one season only thing. It was like, we developed it because it was, I don't know, we probably made a mistake by buffing something one time. We're like, oh, we'll just finish it and show it. It's interesting. And then got a bunch of orders for it and made it in a bunch of colors, and then it was gone in a year. Yeah. But so there are products like that, and then there are times too where we will do stuff and it's not, I don't understand why we're doing it because it's like really highly finished, or it's like you can buy that anywhere. Like you can buy that, and not only can you buy it anywhere, but like we're not very good at it.
Yeah, they're just better.
Like a really flat gray or something like that. So we do stuff, and that's not limited to like a single base tannage, but yeah. And I mean, there's plenty of products that we make and we have made. And actually I'll say anytime we make a product and it's not right, I don't like it.
Yeah.
Fair. So that happens probably more often than I would like to say, but
you did a much better job answering that than I did. Cause I kind of struggled with it. My answer was actually Stampede. Cause for me it was more, I notice I'm strangely interested in the feel of things. Yeah. And there's something about the Stampede horse fronts that feel like nails on a chalkboard to me. There's something in the tannage and the correction of the grain in there that it like hurts me to feel it.
It can be a little dry feeling, but there's, as a finished, because I think I know what you're talking about.
They burnish it up and it looks nice.
Yeah, as a finished product, it's nice. And I do think it's nicer on steer, on cowhide than it is on horse. In terms of the feel.
It literally feels like shale or like slate.
Yeah, it doesn't have like that nice oily waxy feel that that it should have, I guess, to make it feel nice.
And you mentioned gray. I was talking to Dan last night because of this hit of the Royal Blue Cypress. And I was asking him with an agenda in mind. I said, if there was another color that we offered, what would you think it should be? And we landed upon gray on the Cypress, which I think would be super badass because you can get that color, you can achieve that gray on a Latigo base and then turning it into Cypress. So I was kind of thinking Castle Rock. What's your favorite gray?
We've done a gray.
Yeah, but like Cypress with the wax.
We've done a gray Cypress. We've done.
I haven't seen it.
I don't remember what it was. I think it may have been a charcoal gray.
Do you like it? I want light. I want like dove
gray. It wasn't that light. It was light. It was like a mid gray. It was nice.
Some of the New Balance grays are nice.
Like it wasn't that light.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it'll be.
Is that achievable, you think?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It'll still have to be. And the lighter you get, like the more heathery it'll get. Like I think it'll still have a slightly red or a brown cast to it because of the retannage, but better than on the
And the Dublin is just
Dublin,
not even reasonable. All right. Compare Horween Austin leather to other Horween.
Horween?
All right. Next question. I'm going to leave all this in because I love making mistakes. Everybody call me out. All right. Next question. To compare Horween Austin to other Horween leather. And this is from Sherman Tan on YouTube. This one was a curveball for me also.
Yeah. I mean, it fits into the product mix. I mean, the idea, it's supposed to be like a more calf-like product, like a more traditional sort of fine-grained, evenly finished leather. So it fits sort of on that end where it doesn't have quite the depth of color. It doesn't have pull-up. It's a specific product, and we actually don't make it very much anymore.
It's a waterproof guy too.
It was developed to be waterproof.
Yeah.
You were gonna
not say that
because waterproof. I mean, they're to call something waterproof, it has to withstand water for a certain number of flexes, and we've been having a really hard time with waterproof leather lately. It's interesting, and I guess this is a good comparison because it's supposed to be waterproof and it's sometimes waterproof, but when we tan it, there's the waterproofing oils are very, I guess delicate. Maybe it's not the right word, but they're reactive. So if we mix certain components with those oils, like at any point, it like makes them not waterproofing anymore. Or they won't waterproof the leather anymore. So there's something has changed somewhere in the building that's reacting with those oils and those inputs. That's at the end, we're not ending up with a waterproof leather. So we've been testing it like all along the way to figure out when does it stop becoming waterproof?
For me, Austin, I feel has. I was going to ask you to describe it, but I really want you to tell me if I'm correct.
I will tell you if you're correct.
I really enjoy the feel of the Austin, especially when it's crust, because it has this sort of velvety grain to it, which is interesting. You don't feel that on most things. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, it's got a waxy.
It almost feels suede, but it is not. You know?
Yeah, it's a very smooth sort of wax. It's not oily at all. Right. Leather. It's got kind of like a wax, like it has like a little bit of friction to it, so it feels soft. It's nice. Yeah. When it's nice, it's really nice. It's like a really. I mean, to talk about stuff that we don't like, I do like Austin.
Get your act together, Nick.
Yeah. Well,
now, have you done so? That's what the other thing to talk about here is there are versions of Austin, because you can do a crust Austin and then you can heavily finish it too, which I believe you've done many times. And that finishy version of Austin you might as well be any other tannery, in my opinion. That's a good example of going back to the last question. I got another question for you, Nick.
Yes.
Actually, this is probably more for me. My dad asked this question. I said, "Hey, Dad, I'm doing a podcast with Nick. What questions would you ask us?" And he goes, "What's the most common size belt?" You've sold some belts. Do you have an observation in size?
You've sold more than me.
We sold a lot of belts.
The middle, medium.
What would you call medium?
34, 36, 38.
You nail it. It's a normal curve or bell curve, like from 36 is the most common size, Dad. Thanks for the question, Dad. All right. Here's a long question from Matt. By the way, Matt on YouTube, I want to shout out because he always has very thoughtful questions. In a video that in a live stream I was doing, I was talking about Dublin tannage and how Horween applies the Dublin tannage to Steerhide. And it made Matt wonder, is Steerhide more consistent in what it is throughout the whole body of the bovine? As an example, with a horsehide, you have the shell layers in the butt, on the butt end of the horse. Would something like this exist in a cow, or is the shoulder leather from a bovine very different and the butt apart from the thickness? And there's a second question here, but let's narrow that first one down. Basically, it seems like, what's the difference between a bovine and a equine animal in terms of like a leather?
It's much more consistent in terms of substance, meaning thickness, and also like how stretchy it is and like the composition of the hide itself. It's the Steerhides are more consistent. I mean, you sort of have the same, like when you have a Steerhide, if you were to analyze like every little part of it, it's all basically the same other than how the fibers are arranged. So like the belly is, the fibers are not as tightly woven. And then as you go up towards the backbone, they get tighter and more even and everything gets flatter. But throughout the hide, you get pretty consistent sort of system, with the exception of, I think he said the thickness, where the thickness does tend to it gets thinner as you get down to like the belly area. And I've been explained because that's because of the way the animal grows. And horsehide, before I move on, the cowhide is stretchy in the direction that you would think it would be. So from like front to back, like you want to cut horizontal to the backbone because that's what's going to take the stretch out of it the most. And then horsehide is like the opposite. So horsehide is less stretchy if you cut straight across the backbone. So it's the opposite. And then it's less consistent because the weight falls off kind of like in a triangle. So the butt is the heavy part, and then it would be heavy like sort of up where the horse's mane would be. And then the front legs tend to be really lightweight, like the front. So it's like a triangle. And then there's the shells are dense and completely different than the rest of the hide. And there's also the mane, and the mane, is very coarse hair. So the fiber, like the grain structure there is crazy.
Basically,
so
like
crazy.
If
pronounced.
the shell wasn't in that hide, you would not buy them. It's like so random. They're just so difficult to work with that you might not consider tanning it.
Well, I'll push back on that because when they're nice, when the selections are nice, when they're not super cut up or anything, the fronts can be amazing because the grain is really pronounced and they're abrasion resistant and it's not super crazy stretchy. It's like I don't think there's anything better for jackets than like a good horsehide. And I will say that there are some horse fronts out there in the world that we don't make that I think are made into
nice
jackets that are super nice.
All right, touche. I'm gonna circle back here too.
Okay.
I think there's a big misconception between the difference between the hide type and the tannage type. So I often receive the question of what animal is the Chromexcel on? And even by people asking that question makes me think that there's a huge problem here with terminology. So can you help me explain the difference between hide type and tannage type? Because you can translate in this example Dublin tannage. He's asking about the difference between Dublin on Steerhide and Horsehide.
Everything is basically interchangeable. Like you can do, I guess with varying levels of success, you can put any tannage on any hide type. I mean, you could make Dublin lamb or goat.
You've done it on the bison.
The bison. You could do deer. I mean, you can do so. The tannage is just what you're putting over the hide type. So, I mean, the horsehide and the cowhides are very different for the reasons that we just mentioned. So it just depends on the use case, really, and then availability of raw material in the case of horsehide.
Big differences, and let me try to simplify the answer to the big difference in animal hides. If you're looking at Dublin as an example of a tannage on several different animal hides, the horse hides tend to be thinner and have more dramatic grain variance, but also you're explaining that it's got a tougher grain, a little bit more abrasion resistance, where the bovine tends to be thicker sometimes. It can be thin. It can be belt weight thickness, harness weight thickness. Bison, in this example, is extremely intense grain character. It tends to be like medium weight, mid weights. So like the tannage can be put onto different hides and you get different results, but it is still the same. They still call it the same tannage.
Yeah. Midweight. But when you say midweight, it's like 4 ounces to 6 ounces.
Yeah,
it's like top on that.
So horse is roughly 2 to 3 ounces
for the front part. Yeah.
Bison 4 to 6. Steer hides can be from 3 to 15.
Yeah, 3 and yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. All right. The second half of his question from Matt on YouTube. He says, I find it ever so cool that Viberg is mentioned alongside Ashland Leather. I think that Viberg and Ashland must be the top end consumers of Horween and technically not really competitors. But volume wise, could you estimate how big of a customer Ashland and Viberg would be of Horween? It must be minimal considering clothing, car upholstery, and furniture manufacturing. Thanks again. Keep it up. Please. Love the nerdery in the best way possible from Matt.
This is you, Phil.
Okay, I can answer this because I know I have a full perspective. Viberg and myself at Ashland, we're incredibly small, like very, very, very niche in terms of volume of what we make. I can't speak directly about the Viberg stuff, but I've seen how much leather they had ordered in the past, and I can assume that I know that they are not ordering as much leather as many other places. And then consider also, in addition to that, Horween is a very, very small tannery. So we're talking about a niche of a niche. So these are both very small businesses. And then when he mentions clothing, car upholstery, and furniture manufacturers, not a lot of the leather that you're making, Nick, is going towards those functions.
Very little.
Yeah, it's mostly sporting goods and footwear is what you make.
That's, sporting goods footwear is like 80%. And then 20% is everything else. So that would include small leather goods and upholstery and whatever.
I'm probably less
Clothing.
than 1% of that 20%. We're small. I mean, we probably buy, I should know this, more than 10,000 feet of leather a year, which is like a lot for us, but 10,000 feet is like what our competitors are buying in a month. So to put it that way, actually our competitor, like our peers are buying more than 10,000 a month. It's a lot of wallets.
It's a lot. Yeah, I mean, it's good. I mean, we like to do all different sizes of business, and it doesn't really matter how big or small the company is. We will work with whoever we can, especially if we have the ability to run that size order. I mean, the minimums are like the only thing that would keep anybody away from putting an order in that's really small.
What's a minimum order for, like, if I wanted to order a sample color of Cypress, how big of a mill size would you need to run?
It just depends. We'll talk offline.
Well, I talked to Dan yesterday,
Yeah.
and he's like, well, Horween's going to want you to order at least 200 feet.
Yeah.
But that's like, I was like, oh, well, like, I kind of don't know if I'm going to like how the color's going to turn out. So it's a little concerning to just drop.
It depends on the color. I'm hoping that we can run a few different base colors and then finish off of base colors for that. Like kind of like we do for natural Dublin. Like natural Dublin gets finished into like English tan and natural and a few other of the lighter colors. Mm-hmm. So if we can run bigger
and sample it all off
of one base color, not only can we be more responsive in terms of delivery dates, but we can be a little bit more friendly in terms of pricing.
I'm going to tell you this right now, though. I'm going to pay you extra money to drum dye it because I want all this. I want like the cross section and the flesh side of the leather. So I will wait and pay more. You're talking about sample quantities. What's like a normal production size?
It just depends on the thickness. We do everything by weight. So
by thickness, weight. Yeah.
By pound. Well, by that, but also by pounds.
Okay.
Like how many pounds can we get into the actual physical wooden drum? And that's all done by weight. So we have to weigh based on how much the hides weigh. That's how much material goes in, and then also, how much the capacity of the mill itself. So the thicker the leather, the lower
the area.
Yeah, because it's heavier by area, I guess. So it's a little. Anyway,
you're tanning in volume.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's basically.
And the yield and measurement is in area.
Is in feet. So it just depends on the thickness, and then so we have different sized drums. So we have like a chart, which is kind of confusing unless you have a lot of context on what weight corresponds to what volume weight corresponds to what mill size, and then we have pricing attributed to each of those different mill sizes because it's the same amount of work to retan a drum, no matter how much is in it, basically. So if it's if it's a bigger drum, then it ends up being less per square foot because we can spread that labor out.
So if you're running like a boot weight 6-ounce stuff, how many square feet am I getting in a Chromexcel drum? Like, what's my minimum Chromexcel drum size? For production, I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, 2,000 pounds. I don't know.
Yeah, it's it's like 100 to 110 sides,
Yeah.
roughly. I don't know. It's been a while, Nick.
Yeah. So it's like, it's like it's like between like I guess 2,000 and 4,000 feet is sort of like where probably the efficiencies exist. And then once you get over that, I don't know, this is like a really good tanner, technical, like Chris Kolblinger tanner question, because I look at the schedule, but I don't always look at the quantities that we're tanning at, which is I probably should pay more attention to. But yeah, so I mean, generally we like orders over like 2,000 feet, and because then we can be efficient in terms of the process all the way through finishing and everything.
So you're telling me to order 2,000 feet at a time?
That'd be nice. Yeah. You get better pricing. Got to spend money to save money.
All right. Is that where the curve of pricing maxes out to, or is there like a different economy of scale that I can tap into?
Yeah, I mean it's
Asking
complicated.
for a friend.
I mean we try to take advantage of efficiencies wherever we can. We realize we're an expensive producer, so we're also trying to not be such an expensive producer. So I mean, we're taking advantage of whatever we can. I mean, there's no really. It's such a wacky business at times. It's hard to. We're doing the best that we can.
Gotcha.
I guess.
I'm going to keep it rolling here with the questions, Nick. We got an email from L who says, I think this gets mentioned a lot in the podcast, but what's the difference between drum dye and aniline dye? Drum dye, from what you said, basically the grain and flesh set aside, the same coat of coloring that gets thrown into the drum dye, the leather. I'm not reading correctly. Let me start this over.
I think I understand.
Okay. This was not because the person wrote it poorly. It's because I'm not able to read with a microphone in front of my face. All right, take it, Nick.
Well, I guess, so the question is, what's the difference between drum dye and aniline dye? And I guess the answer can be very little, but they are, my headphones are falling apart. They,
You want to take a break?
That's okay. They're staying on my head. The drum dye happens during retanning, so we're actually adding in. It's like a washing machine. Like if you were to add dye into your washing machine and to dye your clothes that way, that's where the drum dyeing is coming in. So you can get the color all the way through, front to back, the same color, and then aniline dyeing refers to finishing only. So when you're working on just the surface, so you can work on the flesh side on the back side, but generally you're just referring to the grain side. And aniline just means without pigment. It just means no solid. So you're using, the example we always use is like a piece of wood. Like if you stain a piece of wood, that's like aniline finishing it. So you can see all the grain and you can see the knots and everything that's in it, and it's clear. Where like a pigmented finish would be like a paint, where you're just painting over it. So whatever is underneath doesn't really matter in terms of how it looks. And both have their applications. It's not like one's necessarily bad or anything, but it's just different. So
Are you saying that you cannot put pigments in a drum and drum dye with pigments?
You can, but they're different.
So you could make a drum dyed non-aniline or semi-aniline leather?
You could.
I'm twisting you here.
Yeah, it's a different, like the pigments that you spray that are like a paint are completely different than the pigments that you use that would go into a drum. And to my knowledge, the pigments that would go into the drum dyeing process are relatively new.
Like as a technology?
Technology, yeah. Because they're crazy. They're like micro. They're like super duper fine. And it's interesting. I don't think we've tried any of them.
Would you like to try it on some gray cypress?
Sure. I mean, they usually use it. What I've seen is like bright colors, like yellow and red and orange, and it's like really nice.
I'll try that too.
Yeah,
I'll buy it. Give me my 200 feet of it.
Yeah. We'll just source those pigments from Europe and get you your 200 feet.
I'd be down to try it. I like experimenting. There's a second half to this question from L. Can Teacore leather be done with drum dyed? How is that done at the tannery? When you just say that it is a top coat, is that similar to a machine spraying dye on the grain side? So there's some multiple questions in here, but let maybe start with what is Teacore?
Do you want to take this one?
Well, Teacore, in my understanding, Teacore means that the leather was drum dyed and then finished with a different color over the top. So it could be not even color applied in the drum. It could just be a natural base, or you apply other color over the top. Essentially, you're creating, like, imagine a sandwich where the bread is always the bread, but you can make pumpernickel bread and then put sort of different fillings on top, and you get this layered effect. So I suppose like an open face sandwich. So the Teacore aspect is the bread and the filler not matching in terms of color. So if you look at it on leather, the most common that I see from Nick is a black Chromexcel, which is a natural base, and then that dark, heavy black over the top. So when you scratch the black on the surface, you reveal some of the lighter tones underneath. It's like a little bit more like a taupe color. So when L is mentioning the difference, so when L is asking, can Teacore leather be done with drum dyed? Yes. In fact, that might be the only way to do it, but that's only half the story. The other half of the story is the finishing that goes over the top. And then the question continues to say, when you say that it's a top coat, is that similar to a machine spraying dye on the grain side? And the answer to that is yes. They can spray color over the surface, not necessarily just a top coat, which could just be a clear coat, but it has to include color into it. So you can brush color onto the surface of a different color underneath. You can spray a darker color over a lighter color. These are all things that would encompass what Teacore leather is. And again, the big important thing that I think people are looking for in this Teacore concept is a contrast of color from the crust color to the surface color.
Yeah, in the Teacore, I think that generally people are thinking about a natural, like, base leather.
Natural in terms of color?
Natural, like a natural veg tan, like a light brown, and then with some other color finished over top. I think that's sort of the idea that most people have in their head. But yeah, like what you're saying is, I mean, the color of the core, and I think the T core is like, whatever, like color, the color of tea, I guess. But the concept is that you've got the inside of the leather, the base of the leather is different than the surface of the color, like you're saying. So as you wear it, you get a different color that comes out.
Yeah, Teacore.
Yep.
Love it. I like the look. There's actually I don't know if you saw it today or yesterday. Recently, there was by the time this comes out, it's not even relevant, but there was a photo posted on the Patina Thunderdome Instagram of these awesome boots. I'll show you after, but incredible. I think it was like a horse butt thing, Japanese. Yep. Who's the maker? Punch or something like that. They look really, really cool. And I'll drop if I can remember to, I'll drop a photo into the YouTube video here.
Yeah, it looks. I like that. It's a rugged look. It's like a
people are pissed though, man, because they're like, there's no way that's been worn for 4 months.
All right.
And I guess the guy was like rides motorcycles and just like really beats them up, and people are angry at how they look awesome, but they honestly they look like a decade old. To me, it's cool. All right, next question.
People are angry.
People are angry, just generally. All right, next question. Does every horse contain a shell, or are there cases where there are no shells in that hide? And the reason that the question asker asks, the reason they're asking is they saw a quote in the article from Stitchdown, and the quote here is, European horse butt for engineer boots comes from the shell of the horse. Essentially, it's tanned from shells that did not have the right level of fiber density to undergo the process to become shell Cordovan. HD asks, how true is this?
I wonder where that quote is from.
It's from stitchdown.com.
I know, but who is European horse butt for engineer boots? Like who? So they're talking about a European...
Some tannery in Europe must have told him this. Seems...
I think that's probably muddying the waters here. Yeah. That's where the question is coming from. Yeah, I mean, that's not my experience, that we don't select things that have different fiber structure for different things, because you can't really tell what the fiber structure is like until you got the shell all the way out anyway. So at that point, it's already shell. I mean, we do... Like when we do like the work shoe butts and the whole horse butt products that we do that don't go to Cordovan, we do try to pick out shells that aren't like gigantic, because then we're,
It's not a waste of a huge, nice shell then.
yeah, I mean, you still want some shell area in the product because that's what the product calls for. But I mean, that's really the only, that and then the grain, since they're using the grain side, it can't be like all cut up and where it's a little more forgiving on shell since we're using the inside. But yeah, but the fiber structure doesn't really have anything to do with whether or not it becomes shell Cordovan, at least in the selection phase in the very beginning. I mean, we might get to the end and be like, oh, this shell has this, that, or the other thing going on with it.
But then it's already cut.
It's already shell.
It's like you can't go backwards.
No, we can't. Yeah. You can't make it into something else at that point. But I mean, I guess the other question is, do some horses not have shell?
I've never seen that.
I've seen a couple.
Really?
But for the purposes of the question, they all have shells. I mean, it's like
you've seen this.
For real? I've seen
a genetic,
and I have no idea
anomaly.
what was going on. I mean, I've probably seen it like 3 or 4 times. Like, it's not like it's out of more than the more than 3 or 4 shells I've seen.
Literally no shell, or does it like it's just tiny little baby?
Yeah,
one?
no, nothing.
Wow, that's really interesting.
And I have no idea.
Mutation, right?
Or maybe it just didn't develop the same way, or it didn't.
Yeah,
I have no idea. But for the purposes of the question, every equine animal has a shell. It's just they're just varying thicknesses and sizes in terms of area.
So if I was a tanner and I was trying to sell leather and make more profit, I would say to you whatever this quote says. Basically, because it's a lot more work for you to expose the shell and get it to completely smooth and then cut off a bunch of stuff and have to find another home for that. It's a lot more profitable to keep that all intact and make a product like you'd make called work shoe butt. So I would imagine that there's a little bit of a motivation to try to sell that product as a tanner. So to me, honestly, like I actually have a work shoe butt Chromexcel watch band that I like very much. It's like a much more dense and firm version of Chromexcel, and it's more grainy, and I like it. But I also think Cordovan is special enough to where it almost feels like a slight bit of waste to turn a butt into this product as opposed to Cordovan. And I've debated with your dad a bit about this. He's like, it's different. So I get it. It's like a different product. They're both specialty things, but I would imagine as a tanner, you're going to make more money by not having to separate off the strip from the shells and like do all this separate processing. So I think there's maybe a little bit of a tanner motivation in that quote.
It's certainly simpler to not. I think that, so what they're talking about here, so taking it from like a whole horse butt, taking it from that step to a finished piece of shell Cordovan, like that's the hard part. The tanning part is specialized, and like we have our formulations and everyone has their own formulations, but like that's basically the same process that everything goes through. It only gets hard like once we have to start to trim it and expose the shell. I mean, that's actually the hard part. So this is just like we sell it and we just don't do the hard part.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's more profitable to do that.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what they're charging or how much it costs them to make. So it could or could not be. But the other challenge is I don't know who this is or what their process is like. It's just the amount of time that takes. Because we could have some issues or see some issues in a product, and then we're like, well, when did we make this? We started this 6 months ago. So like, is this an isolated incident? Are we going to start? Do we need to check now? Like, do we have 6 months of product that could have the same issue behind it? So it's a tricky. Anytime you extend the timeline, the further out that you extend the timeline, like the more risk you have in every single additional step that you take. So it takes a lot of. You just have to experience, I guess, is the only answer. But
do you have any? So my thought process is one of the big reasons that I would want as a tanner would want to run more whole horse butts as opposed to turning them into shell Cordovan is if I had too many hides. What's the hide situation like right now for horse hides? Because I know it ebbs and flows. Like sometimes it's very difficult for you to get even the hides. Where are you at in that cycle right now?
It's okay right now. It's stable enough. I mean, the for us, it's just getting the pieces through the building in terms of the bottlenecks and the spots that, I mean, like we were just saying, like the actual hard part, the handwork. I mean, there's not a lot of people out there that can do it.
Yeah, how many Cordovan shavers do you know in the world?
I know like two.
Yeah, I met some new guys yesterday, actually.
Yeah, we've got two that are really good, and then a few more that can do it, but they're just slower, which is fine. But we've trying to make the products too, so but anyway,
it's not easy.
It is definitely not easy. But yeah, the raw materials are good. Is stable enough, especially in the way the world is right now.
I'm going to move on to another question here from Chanson, who is a self-described crossover listener from Stitchdown. Which shout out to Ben and Ticho, Stitchdown Shoecast. We're fans. We have a question here from Chanson who says, I have a pair of Color 8 shell Aldens, and I don't know if I'm being too aggressive or not. Is it possible to overbrush the shell? Let's just stop there, Nick.
Not really.
Okay, then the question,
unless you're using like a wire bristle brush, then yeah, you could.
I'm going to call you.
Then any amount of brushing is overbrushing.
Well, the second half of the question, they keep talking about using a 1-inch boar bristle brush, and the person can see the lines from the brushing motion. Not sure if these are scratches or if it's the Alden shellac being worn through. In that same vein, what's the best way to strip the Alden finish? So let's go with the first question with the brushing. I've actually seen some abrasion from like literally bristle brushes. Yeah. The boar hair, I couldn't imagine scratching.
There's so many different. I think that the problem there might be more the length of the bristle than the actual material itself. That's a pretty short brush.
Yeah.
So you don't get a lot of. It could be a little aggressive. I mean, I like for
how tightly packed those bristles are too.
Yeah, I mean I have some. I mean, it depends on the maker and the brush and everything. But there's the boar brushes. If I'm thinking of what he's using, they're pretty tough. Like, so that might be a little bit too.
They're abrasive.
Yeah. Well, they're just like they're going to leave little scratches. I mean, you're not going to hurt the leather. Like, it's not damaging the leather, and it's something you can't repair. But it's not. If you're trying to maintain the shine or shine your shoe, like I might use that brush in the beginning, like to brush off any addition or
dry dirt or something.
I might have used that brush in the beginning to get any like dirt or film or anything off, or even like salt or whatever, just before you do anything else to it. But I like the horsehair brushes for like the final polishing, brushing, like if you're going to brush for a long time, because they're softer in general. But yeah, there's some really soft like pig brushes I've seen.
You have a couple of those.
Yeah,
right?
I've got some like some super fancy
beautiful
Japanese, like really, really nice brushes. And I think the softest one is pig, but I don't know enough about the material to know what. I mean, I know that boars and pigs are the same thing, but from different places, and they live different ways. But that's about all I know.
Well, they go on to say that this boar bristle brush that's 1 inch is rubbing away some of the finish that sounds like the shoemaker, Alden in this example, has applied to the leather. Have you seen that happen before?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it could be happening to just the shell too. It wouldn't necessarily need to be Alden. I mean, it could be anybody.
Yeah, they say it sounds like it looks like the shellac is their word that's being worn through. All right, so in the same vein, what's the best way to strip the Alden factory finish? I hear of people using acetone, but that kind of scares me.
Me too.
Yeah. I mean, have you removed finish from?
I have.
What'd you do?
I use lighter fluid, but
where's our liability lawyer here?
Yeah.
Don't use lighter fluid on any of your stuff, please.
Yeah, don't.
But it worked for you, or what?
Do what I say, not what I do. It does work. Yeah, it works. It's pretty. I mean, it's a little tough. I'm not sure. I wouldn't recommend it, but I did that mostly because I had heard a story about my grandfather doing it. And I was like, I wonder. So I did it to be traditional or to follow in his footsteps. But
wait, let me back you up on that. So it was like a finish that the shoemaker put on the leather, you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you were able to strip it off with the.
Yeah, I mean, he used lighter fluid because he smoked a pack of cigarettes a day and had
He's like, what would happen?
and had a lot of lighter fluid like around. It wasn't like that was the material of choice. It just happened to be the one that was there.
You know what? On those lines, I heard that you or somewhere else used to like finish leather with gasoline or something like that.
Allegedly, we were making a rubberized leather.
Allegedly.
And they would allegedly dissolve the rubber pellets like into the gasoline, and then allegedly dip the leather into the mixture with like the dissolved rubber, and then the gasoline would then allegedly evaporate, leaving the rubber on the surface of the leather. So
that's wild.
Very effective.
I can see why you don't do that.
But a very serious set of allegations.
Well, it's kind of interesting that you're able to. Maybe that's the dissolving of the finishes in the same way that the rubber is sort of. I don't know.
Yeah, the acetone is stripping. I mean, it's like a stripping. It's like a paint thinner almost. I mean, the best way to remove the finish is to wear it over a number of years and allow for the finish to come off naturally in the ways that it would come off, so that it looks like it happened naturally. And I think that anytime you try to pull stuff off faster, it tends to look, at least for a period, it doesn't look exactly right. That said, I wouldn't go to acetone. I would use, just like warm water would be fine. I mean, it's because it's, especially if it's color 8. I mean, the burgundy color, the burgundy dyes and the red dyes tend to be more mobile and want to come off anyway. So be able to pull off a good amount of the color just with like a warm rag, like a warm water on a towel. Yeah.
Just rub it.
And that's kind of like, I guess you could use like a little, like dilute some rubbing alcohol, maybe like 10% alcohol to water if you wanted to be more aggressive. But I just, because when you put a solvent on leather, the solvent goes on there and by design it's evaporating really quickly, and that evaporative mechanism dries the leather out. So because you're not just taking off, you're not just the dye is coming off, like you're stripping out waxes and oils and moisture from the leather. So, it's okay to try, I think, but you just have to know like what you're actually doing to the leather.
I'm going to have to say for our legal advice here, don't do anything Nick says. Okay? Because we don't want people saying, hey, Nick ruined my shoes.
Don't do any of what I just said.
But if you were to do it, that could be a potential way that we don't suggest.
About what people have told me they've done. I don't do anything.
And there's another third to this section. What's the best product for ensuring proper hydration? Saphir Renovateur, every 6 wears, every 20 wears. You have any experience with conditioner?
You've got shell shoes. What's your experience?
I don't do anything. For me, I just wear them and love them. I've had success just applying a little bit of moisture, very light amount, and then brushing it. That seems to do enough for me. That leather is very well tanned. But in products that I've worn that start to look a little dried out, selfishly, I sell a product called Tanner's Blend. That's an amazing conditioner that seems to pair nicely with just about everything you make, Nick, especially the heavily oiled and waxy products like the Chromexcel. It's like perfectly matched for. In fact, your dad almost switched to using the Tanner's Blend for the glazing. I don't know if you remember that, but he was using the Tanner's Blend to glaze the shells, and he's like, "This is working great." I don't know why I should make him switch, but you're still using the Venetian shoe cream.
Yep.
I've been doing for the Patina Thunderdome, trying something new, applying Venetian shoe cream every month. So I'll polish it once a month now. And to answer Chanson's question here, I don't know I think that's overkill because I'm starting to see a little bit of wax buildup. So I don't know as far as frequency for applying polish or conditioner. For me, it's as needed is the answer.
That's the answer.
That's the answer. All right.
Depends on
next question.
It depends also on the age of the shoe. The older the shoe gets, the more conditioning it might need. And it depends on how much you're wearing it too. I think that, and how you want it to look. I've got shell boots that I have I've had for years that I've polished like once because that's the way.
Well, what
I
about
want them to
condition?
look? Or that's what I mean. I've conditioned them once. I have never polished them. I just condition them and brush them. I don't really use polish ever. I just use like the Sapphire products or like a Venetian shoe cream, and then I just brush afterwards because that gives me as much shine as I want. Because I don't really like a super hard like spit shine. But it just depends on, and it just depends on how you want your shoes to look. I mean, you'll know when you've put too much on.
I see it right.
It'll
looks
start
cloudy.
to get, it'll start to look, or it'll start to build up in the creases and look even dirtier because you're like dirt wants to stick to that extra wax. But yeah, I mean, it's just, I think that, and it depends on the on the product too. I mean, the lighter the product, the more forgiving it is. I think that the renovator, however you say that.
Oh yeah, I don't know if I did it correctly there.
I don't
embarrassed
know.
myself.
Yeah. Is a little more forgiving than Venetian shoe cream.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit lighter. Maybe there's a little bit less wax in it. So you can. It's just a little easier to control, I guess. Is what I'm saying. But so it just depends on the product. It's like totally like trial and error. Like what kind of leather is it? What kind of shoes are they? How often are you wearing them? What do you want them to look like?
Personal preference.
It's totally personal preference.
All right, good question though. To get 3 questions from Chanson. All right, we got one more person asking questions here with a few different questions. Jacob asked, do you know of specific boot makers that are currently using woolly Chromexcel, Nick? It's a beautiful leather. It's one of my favorites.
It is. I actually have a pair of woolly Chromexcel boots in the queue. Like, I think it might be my only, not my only. I have
Like on order?
No, they're unworn in my office.
Okay.
And I'm just like, I'm going to start working these at some point. Yeah, they're just
in the queue, like
they're in the
literally
queue.
there.
Yeah, they're just like sitting there. I think that they are Vibergs, and I think Viberg was the last one to use them. They're a dark brown color. I don't know. I have to look. I don't think anyone's using that product at all right now.
They ought to. What is woolly Chromexcel, Nick?
It is just Chromexcel with a different grease blend. It's got the grease blend, the wax, the hot stuffing wax blend that goes into it is just heavier. Basically, it has more lanolin in it, thus the name woolly.
Woolly.
So it has a stronger smell. It smells like lanolin more, and it's waxier and oilier and more water resistant, but also really we can only do it in dark colors because of the additional grease content.
It's just super greasy.
Yeah.
My observation on the woolly, much more grainy than the polished, like traditional Chromexcel, and also more like super dense. And it must be that stuffing blend, which is significantly different than the traditional Chromexcel. Some of the best products I've ever seen, I think your dad still has it. You might have one. The woolly Chromexcel belts that you guys did.
Best.
It's like, it's incredible. It's like super glassy now. It wore in. Maybe we should do some woolly leather goods.
That's my favorite
awesome.
belt leather that we'd make. I think that
We should do some woolly
it's
belts.
really.
Nick. Do you have any sides for me?
May have some double shoulders.
I'll buy them today.
I'll have to look.
Let's make some
Yeah,
woolly belts.
they're serious. They're nice. Yeah, I mean, it feels. I mean, we traditionally do them in like heavier weights. That product is like 7, 8, 8, 9, 9, 10. Like
It's like a harness leather.
it's like unlined belt weight leather. So it feels dense because it is like beefy. But
There's a second part of the question here, Nick,
yep.
which is seemingly unrelated. What are your thoughts on Indonesian bootmakers? Do you have any Indonesian boots?
I don't have any from the Indonesian guys, but I mean they look amazing.
Yeah.
I mean I don't know. I think that the scale is on the small side, but the attention to detail is great, and the materials that they use in terms of like the leather uppers seem to be great. I don't know much about construction methods or like what the actual guts of the shoes are in terms of like shanks and all that stuff. So I can't speak to that, but they look really good.
You're not cutting those boots in half yet? You can ignore that.
No.
My impression on the Indonesian stuff is look amazing. And I think it's special to have this one-to-one relationship with the person that's making your boot. And you can spec it out directly with them. And there's I think it's really neat. And I kind of wish we had that scene in Chicago. And I think there are some people that will do a special one-on-one for you, but they're not really set up for that here, especially with footwear. There's not a whole lot of people doing it. So I think it's special, and I would like to see more of it all over the place.
Yeah, I wonder why that specifically in Indonesia, there's been a bunch of guys that have popped up. I wonder what it is. If there's something, I'm totally ignorant, and it's probably showing, but like if it's a specific part of the country, or if there's a reason.
Or like a big factory that shut down, and like all these people are looking for
I don't know. I don't know either. I mean, I'm not sounding very smart, but that's okay.
So do these smaller manufacturers usually import leather directly from Horween or go through a distributor?
They go through a distributor or an agent. Yeah.
So is that John? We need to have John on the show. By the way, we were supposed to have John on like right now, but he's in Italy.
He's going to, tomorrow. He's leaving tomorrow.
So, and for people that are not familiar, John Collison is the VP of sales for you at Horween, Nick, and he also owns a company called Tannery Row, and he also has a business that imports leather all over the world, or exports.
He like manages all of like the
global solutions,
global sales. Yeah, so he goes to China and the Dominican Republic and Mexico, and he like calls on if there's a specific order issue, like he would be the one, if there isn't a different agent, like he would be the one that would go to the factory and like help them work through any kind of issue, because that happens. And but yeah, we
got to have him on.
We need to get him on. But yeah, he just distributes some, but it just depends on where you are in the world, like which distributor you go to. You can go to our website, and under the context section, there's a
go to Horween Leather or Horween.com.
Mm-hmm. And then contacts, and then there's like a sales agent distributor section, and you can just sort of like whoever's closest in the world, I guess, or you can just ask us and we can figure out.
Just connect.
Where that would go. But yeah, because it's really tough. Well, we're bad at small orders. Like some of the Indonesian guys, if they need like 2 sides of something, like it would be so expensive, and it would take us such a long time to do that going through a distributor is better. They'll take a minimum quantity or a quantity, then they can then sell it on pieces at a time, which is kind of what Tannery Row does. Or that is what Tannery Row does.
I've seen people that have worked with the Indonesian makers buy leather directly from Tannery Row and send it to their shoemaker in Indonesia, which is also a potential opportunity.
Yep.
Another place that I'm thinking of is another person we should have on the show is Matt Foster from Maverick Leather. And we could even talk to Hugh from Buckle Guy. A bunch of places will resell your leather in smaller quantities, or even like cut shapes. Like, I only want like 5 feet as opposed to buying 20 plus feet.
Right.
So there are those other places, but I think Tannery Row and Maverick and Buckle Guy might be good places for people to check out if they want to buy leather to make things for themselves, which I highly recommend. It's really fun to do leather crafting. It's kind of like woodworking.
Yep.
But then you can like wear it with you all the time, which is special.
Yeah, Tannery Row is, to plug Tannery Row, Tannery Row is like our retail like partner, I guess. And that's factory run, like stuff that you would get from us if you were to place an order. So they're just placing production orders and then breaking them into smaller lots and charging you for the privilege to order smaller.
I mean, it's a lot of work
to order smaller quantities. And then also they have to hold that inventory. And then Maverick does basically the same thing, but they're low grades in terms of selection or color, or it's not waterproof, or I mean, it could be a lot of different things, but yeah. So they're sort of 2 different sides of the same coin, I guess, just different grades of product. And I guess the main distinction between the two is you could probably get the same thing over and over and over again from Tannery Row, where you might not be able to get the same thing like for years and years from Maverick, because they're buying like a specific lot of something that's been earmarked for them.
All right, so we had some great questions from Jacob Chanson, HD, L, Matt, my dad, Sherman, GH. Thank you guys for sending those questions. And if you want to have your question answered on the show, we love them. I think these are really fun to do, because I honestly think everything on this that we just spoke about, we would have never come up with ourselves. So send us your questions. You can leave comments in the YouTube channel. I'll start scraping those. And you can email us directly, fullgrainpodcast@gmail.com. Nick, do you have a favorite today?
I just want to say I'm always impressed.
That's your favorite.
How how interested people are, like the level of detail at which they actually want to know. Because I kind of assume that like, oh, this is my world and like I'm interested in it, and it's so specific, and then people aren't really as interested as I am in it, and then it's encouraging to see that people are like, oh, what's the difference between these two, and they actually want to know.
So your favorite is our listeners.
Yes, let's do that.
I'm going to piggyback on that and take the easy way out. Our next guest, who we're about to speak with after this for next week's episode, is a international touring musician, and I decided recently that I would like to take a guitar lesson, a bass guitar lesson, for the first time in 20 years. And it made me think about what was the last time I had a lesson, and it had to be in person. It was in college. So 20 years ago, doing what we are doing right now wasn't even remotely possible or even thought of. Having like a virtual instruction from across the world in real time.
Remotely, no pun intended.
Yeah. It's just amazing to me the time we live in, the technology that we have. That's my favorite right now, the internet. I'm kind of, we started talking about the chat GPT thing. Some of the AI stuff I think is pretty interesting. And I wonder if that's the next like iPhone level of scale that, you know, as I'm feeling right now about 20 years ago, I wonder if 20 years from now that AI might be the new thing, for better or for worse. It's an interesting moment.
Scared either way.
I've been listening and reading a lot of sci-fi about like self-replication von Neumann devices that like travel out into the galaxy and like reproduce themselves and like populate the whole universe. That might be where we're going.
I remember like the Terminator series. I mean, it's not like it's that hard to remember but like Skynet, you like watch that and you're like, oh, this could never happen.
We're at Skynet.
This could never happen. And you're like, wait, actually,
it's happening.
I wonder how, I mean, all of a sudden things don't like Hal, like all of a sudden it doesn't seem so far fetched, which is, I mean, when did Terminator come out?
The 90s.
Yeah.
The first Terminator was like, it might have been 89 actually. Yeah. Or like,
so not that long ago.
30 plus years. Let's
look it up.
Look it up. You should chat GPT it.
1984. That's
84. Yeah, 84. Yeah. It's 40 years. That's the thing about these sci-fi is like,
it holds up.
I can't believe how good they are at predicting some of this stuff. All right, Nick, good
also,
episode
turns
today.
Out Arnold Schwarzenegger, he was in pretty good shape.
Yeah, he's a beautiful man. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.